The desert began where the map stopped, an ocean of burnt ochre sand that swallowed the horizon and blurred under a sky as pale as bone dust. Cade Rivers tasted circuits of static on his tongue as the wind slid across the hull of the bus wreck that served as the last license checkpoint. The checkpoint officers never looked hungry. They watered themselves by the cup, sipped hope through reinforced polymer straws, and wore the blue sigil of Aquiolex, the megacorporation that held the global franchise on thirst. Cade still kept his own sigil in his coat pocket, though he'd ripped the metallic threads from the lapel years ago. Once those threads had meant everything. They had granted him the authority to argue in arbitration courts, to stamp live or dead on appeals for an extra leader, to weigh a family's tears against quarterly forecasts. He had been good at it, too good, perhaps, because in the end he had caught the scent of rot beneath the legal perfume. A woman had died in his waiting room while he was drafting a footnote that would keep a wind farm community from collecting fog for another decade. Her lips had cracked and peeled in silence. Afterward, he saw her face whenever he closed his eyes. That face was with him now, under the checkpoint sun, as he signed the last release form that allowed him to venture beyond licensed territory. The officer, a young man with copper implants along his jaw, traced a stylus across the document. "You understand there will be no reclamation of liability," he recited, voice flat. "You die out there, you stay out there. Your DNA, your personal data, and any intellectual property you carry becomes salvage under the Salvageable Biomatter Act." "I understand," Cade said. He pressed his thumb to the pad. It buzzed, reading hydration levels. Too low, it signaled. Unfit for travel. But the officer dismissed the warning with a shake. The company preferred that travelers crossed the line dehydrated. Less temptation to turn back. They let him keep only one canteen, fitted with a sensor that would ping every kilometer. Had he stayed inside, the sensor would sync with the water towers, deducting credits automatically. Out there, beyond the towers, the sensor's purpose was ritualistic, a reminder that every swallow stole from Aquiolex. He stepped through the last chain-link gate, and the world pivoted. Behind him lay order, drones humming, holograms flickering, the distant clink of filtered streams cascading through carbon nets. Ahead, the silence of the dead zone breathed like a sleeping predator. His boots sank into sand that glittered with microscopic glass. The heat carried the scent of old circuitry and scorched polymer, singed footprints of long-abandoned solar farms. His objective was a rumor, a free well, an artesian pulse that had broken through the sedimentary layers during the quakes of '97 and refused to yield to the licensing teams. Some called it the mother vein, others swore it was a mirage conjured by drought-mad nomads. But encrypted fragments, half-deleted memos, ghost protocol messages, and once a worn cassette whispered into his palm by an insurgent courier all sang the same refrain: water without ledger, water without law. If it existed, it would shatter the world's economy. More importantly, it might wash the guilt from his hands. The first night was an exercise in remembering how to listen. Sound behaved differently when there were no walls for echoes to bounce against. His camp stove hissed beside him while the stars flickered, unpolluted, almost arrogant in their brilliance. He thought of the towers again, where artificial constellations advertised potable hopes. "Drink tomorrow," the slogan ran, projected in liquid gold across the sky of the cities. Out here, the slogan was irrelevant. Tomorrow could not be bought on credit. He unrolled a sheet of smart mylar that mapped atmospheric humidity. The readings were dead flat. The sheet's LED strips pulsed red, no harvest potential. He folded it away. The well, if it lay anywhere, lay far deeper than sensors could taste. Cade recalled another sheet, a corporate non-disclosure he once drafted. In it, he'd personally defined groundwater as potential intellectual capital. The phrase had earned him a promotion. He spat into the sand. The spit was gone before it landed, snatched by the thirsty air. Sleep came in shallow cuts. In dream, he stood in a courtroom where the judge's gavel was a dripping icicle melting with every blow. Someone in the pews, the dead woman, maybe, kept asking whose water it was. He tried to answer, but his throat filled with gravel. A metallic shriek yanked him awake. The sky had bruised into violet, and a glider drone circled overhead. Its wings were tattered, its guidance lights dim. It must have been scavenged long ago and repurposed. He clutched the canteen. The drone was sniffing sensors. If it detected unauthorized extraction, it would vector in. But after a slow spiral, it veered off, headed north, and was swallowed by the haze. He waited until his pulse eased before he packed. Morning tasted of battery dust. He calibrated his compass to dead electric lines that rose in skeletal rows from the sand. These had once been part of the Great Desalination Network, an experiment bankrupted when Aquiolex patented the evaporation itself. He walked beneath arching tubes where salt still crusted like frost. Occasionally the wind would break a chunk free. It fell like brittle snow. By midday he found a caravan track, grooves pressed by wide tires, half erased by shifting dunes. Footprints, 2000s perhaps, yet no fresh marks. The trail felt ancient, mythic, even the way old pilgrimage routes must have felt to medieval thinkers. He followed instinct as much as direction. The whisper wire in his mind pulled him westward toward canyon country where the ground once curled over aquifers like locked fists. His memories tried to fill the silence. He remembered negotiating with a desert tribe whose entire knowledge of law fit inside a single proverb: the throat knows no ownership. He had provided them a folder of contracts in exchange for a feed tube the size of a child's arm. When the ink dried, the tribe vanished into corporate housing districts and never saw the sun again. The feed tube made the company billions. He hiked until blisters burst and reformed in damp crescents. He rationed sips, 3 measured swallows in the morning, 1 at dusk. The canteen's sensor chimed warnings that escalated from yellow to crimson. He ignored them. The corporation might track the pings, but they could do little. The dead zone was outside compliance jurisdiction. Here violence was cheaper than litigation. On the 4th day, he crossed paths with a dust skiff held together by scavenged carbon gates and the manic will of its pilot. The pilot, a woman with lenses welded over her empty eye sockets, hailed him with a gesture that might have been a wave or the drawing of a weapon. He raised his hands. She coasted closer, her skiff's tri-wheels slicing dunes into ribbons. "You bleed corporate," she rasped through a cracked speaker garlanded around her neck. "Used to," he replied. Her laugh burst like a cracked pipe. "Used to means there's still credit in your blood. Where you heading?" "Looking for a spring." "A spring?" She tilted her head as though gauging his height for a coffin. "Springs twist, they coil. Ask a straight question next time." He tried again. "I'm hunting the vein that pours without contract." "Ah." She spat. "Oil? The Wilder's tale. You know it. Everyone dying of thirst knows it. But talk is salt. You need passage." She eyed his canteen. "And you're nearly empty." "I'll trade," he said. He offered data, corporate encryption keys he'd memorized and burnt into microfilm. They could unlock vent archives, maybe even servo lists for drones. To a scavenger, that was gold. She accepted. "My name's Lux," she said and beckoned him aboard. The skiff surged forward with a cough of hydrogen. Behind them, the desert rearranged itself in the wind. Lux's skiff carved a path along ridges where hardened salt glittered like mirrors. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words carried the weight of bone. "Saw a man once," she said, "who traded his shadow for 2 liters. Company kept his shadow on file in case he tried to sneak back under their sun." Cade pictured it, a bureaucrat filing phantoms in drawers labeled substantial/insubstantial. "Did you steal it back?" he asked. "No," Lux said. "We left the drawer open so it could escape on its own." He wondered if she was mocking him or simply telling the truth, the only way deserts allow. Toward dusk they reached a scar in the land, a sinkhole the size of a stadium, rimmed by broken sediment that revealed strata like the pages of a burnt book. Heat rose from the hollow in shimmering ropes. At the center, something glinted. Lux braked the skiff. "That's a drill bit," she said. "Old world tech, half the size of a tower. The bastards tried to tap the rumor here. Broke their spine." The drill lay at a crooked angle, its titanium teeth dulled to nubs. Around it, plastic tents wilted, half buried. A faded banner, still anchored to 2 stakes, read "Property of AQUEOLEX." The letters peeled like scabs. Cade's pulse hammered. Failure was good news. A fractured drill meant the well defied classification. But wells could move, aquifers retreated when wounded. Still, this hole told a story the corporation had believed. That alone meant hope. They camped beside the drill's shadow. Lux scavenged a bundle of thermal blankets that crackled when unfolded. They ate nutrient tablets that expanded like foam against their tongues, generating just enough moisture to swallow. Late that night, lightning stitched the sky without thunder, dry lightning born from stormless friction. Each flash illuminated distant silhouettes moving in crooked marches. "Ghost columns," Lux whispered, unslinging her rifle. "Avoid them. They herd for the water wardens. Licensed hunters." He watched the figures vanish. Fear licked the edges of his mind. How far would the company chase renegade rumors? Farther than the law allowed, certainly. The following day brought canyons, labyrinths cut by rivers long evaporated, their walls etched with mineral ghosts. Lux guided the skiff along chalk marks left by smugglers. In the narrow passages the sun was a sliver, yet heat pooled like molten lead. Hollowed cisterns in the rock suggested ancient springs. Cade's canteen bleated its final warning. He thumbed the mute. Lux said nothing, but her brows knit beneath the lenses. "We're close," he insisted, though he no longer trusted his voice. They ascended a ramp that ended on a plateau strewn with shattered storage tanks. The tanks' logos were scrubbed, but Cade recognized the shape models he had once requisitioned for field tests. He remembered signing off on their deployment near refugee corridors using the logic that scarcity encourages migration patterns favorable to policy enforcement. He felt ice crawl along his gut despite the heat. Lux knelt at a tank and pried a panel free. Inside, powdery residue clung to the walls. She licked a fingertip, then spat. They filled these with desiccant, pulled water straight from the air to deny travelers. She stared at him as if weighing his soul. "How many breaths did you sentence, lawyer?" "Too many," he admitted. Her silence after that felt heavier than any accusation. They resumed under a sky bruising toward dusk. The plateau sloped downward, revealing a valley smoldering with dust devils. In their vortexes, mirrored shards danced, fragments of solar mirrors. At the valley's heart stood a spire of basalt, sharp as a needle. A crack at its base wept a faint shimmer. Lux stopped the skiff so abruptly Cade almost pitched forward. She pointed. The shimmer was undeniably liquid, a trickle that caught the sinking sun and tossed it back in quicksilver flashes. Beside it, a crude altar of stones bore tokens, empty gourds, rings, even a child's faded plush. Pilgrims had been here, leaving debts unpaid. Cade's throat scorched. He slid from the skiff and knelt in the dust. The trickle formed a film across the basalt before falling into a hollow that must have once overflowed. He touched his finger to it. Coolness. Real, undeniable. He raised the droplet to his tongue. Water. Yet it was not enough to drink, not yet. The spring was wounded, bleeding a thread instead of a torrent. Serum seal scars along the crack suggested corporate intervention. They tried to cap it but failed to cork it completely. Like a vein nicked, not severed. Lux crouched beside him. "So the myth walks," she murmured. He examined the basalt more closely. Microfissures branched behind the visible line. If the rock face fractured further, the flow might surge. Or the spring might vanish forever. He needed to decide fast whether to widen the fissure or seek a deeper source. The decision was stolen by the sound of engines. A swarm of dust lifted on the far ridge, armored carriers, lights pulsing cobalt, the signature of water wardens. They had followed the pings after all. Lux looked to him. "Your call, corporate. Fight, flee, or finish the vein." He turned to the tiny stream catching the last rays. The world balanced on its shimmer. He felt the weight of every contract he'd ever penned, every life dehydrated by a line of text. His hand closed around a splinter of basalt jagged as gilt. The engines grew louder, snarling like mechanical locusts. He drew a breath dry as parchment and whispered, "We free it now or never again." She nodded, chambered around, and took position on the ridge. Cade struck the fissure. The basalt split with a sound like wet thunder. A deep internal pop that sent a tremor rippling through the spire and down into the cracked valley floor. For a breath, the fissure held its width. A knife-thin smile leaking silver in the dusk. Then it flexed wider, coughing out a wet gust that smelled of limestone and forgotten roots. Cade felt the pressure change against his eardrums. The air that exhaled carried moisture so dense it tasted sweet on the tongue. He struck again. The shard of basalt in his hand snapped, slicing his palm, but the wound was lost in the roar that followed. The rock peeled open. Water burst out in a blinding fan, hammering the dust, turning the ground beneath him into instant mud. Steam rose where the first hot jets hit sunburned stone and flashed to vapor. A newborn river began to scream down the slope, and with it came a stench of rusted pipes. Evidence of all the ancient drilling rigs that had bored and died in salt. Lux whistled, half in awe, half in warning. Behind them, the warden's carriers crested the ridge, light bars spinning cobalt spirals across the darkening sky. Turrets unfolded, insectal and precise. A stylized drop, the corporate seal, glowed on each armored prow. Loudspeakers crackled. "Cease tampering. Step away from the aperture. This resource is under provisional claim." Lux answered with gunfire. Her coil rifle spat blue arcs that snapped through the twilight. 2 arcs found a front-mounted drone grill. Sparks showered and the carrier slewed sideways, tires clawing for purchase in the rising mud. Cade sheltered behind a slab of basalt that seconds ago had been the spire's skin. Spray drenched him, sluicing blood from his palm. The next carrier fired a flash flare, pure magnesium brilliance that painted every shadow in negative. When Cade's vision cleared, Lux was already sprinting downslope, rifle slung, knees high against the sucking earth. "Move, suit!" she shouted. "They'll gridlock the valley in 2 minutes." He staggered after her, half-blinded, boots vanishing ankle-deep as the newborn stream thickened into a current. Every step splashed. Above, a triad of pursuit drones cut loose, blades whining. The machines fanned out, projecting lattices of red targeting beams that flickered in mist. Lux pivoted, raised her rifle again, but Cade grabbed her shoulder. "Too many," he gasped. "Cover will be gone once the water rises." He pointed downhill toward a stand of ruin. Collapsed tanks, half-buried conduit arches, and, most important, a dark rupture in the valley wall. A maintenance tunnel blasted decades ago and left to choke with debris. Lux hissed agreement. They slid, skidded, sometimes outright swam as the spring's flow gained strength. By the time they splashed beneath the first sagging arch, the channel behind them foamed hip-deep, churning with slabs of broken mirror. Wardens waded after, water up to their armored waists. But their heavy exosuits sank in mud that remembered salt flats and refused to forget. Cade dove into the tunnel first. Inside, the air was cooler, smelling of mold and ancient lubricant. He scraped knees and elbows over fallen girders while Lux fired backward bursts to break pursuing optics. Rounds pinged the tunnel mouth. Concrete spores drifted like radioactive pollen. A 15-meter crawl brought them to an elbow where a corroded service hatch yawned open, its door shredded by past salvagers. Cade shimmied through and dropped into blackness. Lux followed. The rifle clattered on metal grating. They landed thigh-deep in standing water. Stagnant, oily, but water nonetheless. Their lights cut narrow cones across an underground reservoir chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, its far wall pulsing with faint bioluminescent algae. Lux exhaled. "Look at that, corporate. A cathedral for orphans." Cade wiped mud and blood from his face. The slice on his palm burned. The roar of the spring outside reverberated through the steel bones of the chamber. A colossal heartbeat. Somewhere overhead structural seams groaned. "Won't be stable long," he said. "The pressure topside is rewriting the valley floor. So we keep moving." Lux tapped wrist lamps to wider beams. A catwalk hugged the curved wall, rising in tiers toward a smashed ventilation shaft that climbed out of sight. Up or down? Cade hesitated. Up might lead back into Warden search nets. Down, the reservoir itself could link to the aquifer, a subdermal highway of water. But he remembered corporate hydromaps. Tunnels down here webbed like veins, some dead-ended, some collapsed under seismic faults. Navigation would become guessing, and guessing in the dark drowned explorers. Before he answered, a new voice drifted from above. "Lower your lamps. Step to rail with hands visible." The English carried an accent molded by dehydrated lungs, hollow but steady. Dozens of small green dots appeared on the catwalk, infrared sights. Lux's rifle came up reflexively. Cade set a hand on her barrel. Water dripped from his sleeve. "We're not wardens," he called. "They're behind us." Silence, save distant gunfire ricocheting down the tunnel. Then a ladder rattled. Figures climbed. Lean shapes wrapped in patchwork wetsuits. Faces hidden behind rebreather masks fashioned from cracked filter bottles. The leader carried an old-world shotgun stripped of its stock, barrel sawed short. Lux whispered, "Free Rangers." The shotgun bearer reached the chamber floor. He studied them through scratched lenses. Above the mask, his eyes were bloodshot, but aware. "You open the mother vein," he said, not a question. "The valley is rising." Cade nodded. The wardens closed in. "We need passage." "Passage costs," the man said. Cade felt the old reflex, the negotiation instinct, twitch in his gut. He killed it. "I have no more codes," he said. "Just motive. Free water." The man's gaze lingered on Cade's still bleeding palm, on Lux's chipped weapon, on the corporate fabric peeled across Cade's shoulders like an unhealed scar. "Motive's thin currency down here, but blood buys something." He gestured to Cade's hand. "Let it fall." The tunnel drinks tribute. Cade opened his fist. Drops pattered the reservoir, each ring shimmering amber in lamplight. The man turned, motioned for them to follow. Come. The path of siphons is flooding. If the wardens torch their way in, we seal steel behind. They ascended the catwalk. Lights revealed more people. Women, children, elders, all emerging from alcoves, carrying bundles, cables, battered toolkits. These were tunnel clans, the aquifer kin, rumor-born and seldom seen. Lux muttered respect under her breath. Cade counted hundreds, generations living off seepage and pilfered surface tech. In their eyes, he saw the same parched memory that haunted his dreams. Yet they moved with the rhythm of people who believed tomorrow delivered itself without contracts. The leader, who introduced himself as Marrow, guided them through a corridor where air turned damp and warm, the walls pulsing with veins of trickling condensation. Pipes overhead rattled in growing surges. The newborn river up top was burrowing for exits. They reached a junction chamber ringed by 6 doors, each marked with pictographic glyphs rather than words. Spiral, Thorn, Horizon, Seed, and 2 others half erased. Marrow chose Horizon. Doors slid apart on rusted bearings, revealing a freight elevator cage suspended over darkness. Lux frowned. Power! Marrow kicked a pedal generator. Induction coils screamed. The elevator jittered. A fairy light chain flickered to life along the cage ceiling. Dies from time to time, he admitted. Prey to entropy. They squeezed in among crates of patchcords and reed baskets filled with powdered minerals, electrolyte stabilizers, Cade guessed. The cage dropped with a groan. The shaft walls flashed by, revealing murals painted in luminescent algae, a chronicle of exile. He saw depictions of caravans turned away from towers, figures collapsing under blistered suns, children scooping water from mirrored moons. Then recent panels, silhouettes cracking open a basalt spire, water fountaining skyward. His stomach clenched at the mirroring of their moment, rendered already into myth. The cage thudded to a stop. Doors opened onto a cavern so vast Cade's headlamp could not find the ceiling. The floor, however, shimmered. A shallow lake, clear as air, stretching horizon flat. On its surface floated hexagonal lily pads of reclaimed plastic, each bearing tents, solar collectors, tiny wind turbines. Hundreds of them. A drift village glowing teal under strings of scavenged LEDs. Lux inhaled softly. Never thought I'd envy bottom dwellers. Marrow stepped onto a floating causeway. We call it Wellspring, he said. The mother's tears gather here. He tapped the water with the butt of his gun. Ripples chased one another, glinting, unfiltered, unmetered, pre-industrial purity. Taste if doubt rules. Cade knelt, cupped his hands, and drank. It was cool, mineral-rich, alive. Memories of ration tablets and canteen sensors shrank to absurdity. He drank again, greedily this time, until Lux nudged him. Easy, she said. Your guts forgotten abundance. Children gathered, curiosity bright. They whispered about surface storms and metal dragons. Marrow waved them away. Get elders. Council meets. To Cade and Lux he said, we warn you, freedom's fragile. Wardens sniff weakness. If they burrow down, we flood the lower galleries, but that buys hours. We need leverage. Lux understood first. You want him, she said, jerking her chin at Cade. A corporate codesmith buys time. Marrow didn't deny it. Your sensors still ping. Your identity still registers. Patch us into towers. If Aquiolex loses telemetry, they flail. Cade's throat tightened. You need sabotage. We need negotiation, Marrow corrected. But speaking to tyrants requires holding their oxygen hostage. He stared until Cade felt weighed. You carved the wound. Finished the surgery. Hours blurred. They led him to a dome woven from fiber optics, half lab, half chapel. There, a council of tunnel sages fed him data slugs, archived tower frequencies, drone command dialects, outdated encryption suites. He worked, fingers slick with spring water and antiseptic. Lux sat guard at the dome entrance, rifle across knees, eyeing every tunnel that breathed echoes. Cade built a chimera virus, a legal Trojan disguised as a routine compliance ping. Once inserted through his old credentials, It would cascade through billing servers and flip every water license to an open access flag. Duration indefinite, but likely hours before redundancy overrides kicked. Enough, perhaps, for the kin to surface, to fill cisterns, to carve escape arteries deeper into uncharted stone. His skull throbbed with code, but in each recursive loop he felt a strange unburdening, as though every subroutine erased one line of his past's in ledger. At dawn, though dawn here was measured only by seismic lull and distant thunder, he compiled the payload onto a shard drive the size of a fingernail. Lux approached. "Warden's breached Tunnel Delta," she said quietly. "We've maybe 40 minutes. She offered a derm patch. For the hand. Adrenaline dulled pain, he refused. "When this fires, they'll target me," he said. "I need broadcast range. Tower repeater topside." "Suicide," Lux replied. "Mandate," he countered. Marrow agreed to the plan. He armed them with rebreathers and guide flares, then opened a sluice gate that dumped them into a torrent sluicing toward the surface. They shot upward in pitch-black rapids, bumping pipe walls, lungs burning until the rebreathers engaged and pumped cool oxygen. The pipe ended in a maintenance well rammed with debris that water pressure had begun to eject. Lux planted her boots, fired grapnels, and clambered. Cade followed, clutching the shard drive in his injured hand. Their ascent opened onto night air wild with storm, clouds boiling, lightning skeletonizing the basalt spire they had broken. The valley had changed unrecognizably. A lake shimmered where dry dust had stood, reflecting lightning in molten quicksilver. Drone wrecks bobbed like dead insects. Wardens occupied the ridge still, but their carriers sat half-submerged, crews scrambling to erect floodlights. The tower's cobalt beacons strobed erratic, network disruption already nibbling circuits. Lux spotted a relay mast halfway up a landslip where power cables still held. They sprinted, using rock outcrops for cover. Twice they froze as spotlights swept. Thunder and rotor blades drowned their breaths. Near the mast base, a perimeter of razor wire glinted. Lux clipped it with bolt cutters while Cade patched leads from his shard drive into a live service port recessed beneath maintenance plating. His old login took, astonishingly, on the second attempt. Muscle memory typed credentials he had sworn to forget. The network handshake lagged, downstream nodes choking on the kin's interference. Perfect. He injected the Trojan. A soft tone confirmed execution. A breath. 2. Across the valley floodlights winked. Died. Turret gyros slumped. The carrier's seals unlocked with pneumatic size as access privileges defaulted to public. Above, on the horizon, the distant license tower grid rippled, thousands of blue sigils flickering amber, then green, then gone altogether. A city's worth of water meters fell open. The mast hummed like a tuning fork. Sparks spat. Cade yanked the drive free. The port erupted in arcing fire that bit his forearm. Lux dragged him backward as the mast vomited smoke. Wardens shouted distant orders, chaos fracturing the formal bark of command. They fled downslope into reed-tall floodwater, sliding among overturning carriers. A warden officer, bareheaded, tried to level a sidearm. His HUD lenses showed static. Lux clubbed him with her rifle but pushed him under a wave. More lightning split the sky, but these strikes were white gold, followed by thunder that sounded different, deeper, rolling from underground. The valley floor buckled. New fissures unzipped, belching geysers. The mother vein, fully awake now, was rewriting geography. They reached the mouth of a dry arroyo, now a raging spillway, and waited until Tunnelkin hauled them onto a pontoon. Marrow stood there, soaked, laughing without sound. He pointed at the sky. Through sundered clouds, the first true rain in decades began to fall, fat, warm drops that struck floodwater and vanished in steam. Lux removed her lenses, let rain wash scarred eyelids. Cade looked to the basalt spire, half-crumbled, haloed in mist. The water it birthed had summoned its forgotten sibling, skywater cascading free of ownership. He felt tears, mixed of gratitude and exhaustion, and salt washed from his skin. Marrow's voice carried over rising wind. They will come with crucibles and claims tomorrow. Today we drink. He handed Cade a battered canteen, sensor ripped off. Together they filled it from the air. Not the flood, mouths open like children under a gutter. Somewhere towers dimmed, their hologram slogans defeated by simple precipitation. Drink tomorrow became irrelevant. Tomorrow was falling everywhere, unstoppable. And there was not a lawyer alive who could file a cease and desist against clouds. The rain did not fall in sheets but in wandering veils, as though the sky were trying to remember the choreography of storms after so many decades of drought. For 2 full days the valley thrummed beneath that spectral downpour, every rivulet carving new arteries, every old fracture unfurling into a tributary. Mud became silk, stone became sponge, and the air filled with a green smell no one present had ever inhaled before, a primordial scent of germination that made children laugh without knowing why. Cade spent the first night of the deluge helping the aquifer kin lash pontoons together into floating boulevards. Lux turned the coil rifle into a spear gun to pry scavenged solar tiles off drowned warden carriers, and Marrow's clans rigged those panels onto bamboo scaffolds so that the village of Wellspring glimmered like a tideborne constellation. Neon-bright fish, descendants of long-abandoned biotech farms, followed the glow, nibbling at cables. When the children tried to net the fish, the elders stopped them. To hunt first fruit is to borrow scarcity, one woman said, voice husky with awe. Let the valley feast before we do. During brief lulls in the cloudburst, Cade crouched beneath tarp awnings and soldered together a handheld repeater from Warden drone parts. The Trojan he'd unleashed was still racing through corporate backbones, but sheer volume of panic patches meant its half-life shrank by the hour. He needed redundancy, another pulse to keep licenses unlocked long enough for the rain's momentum to spread past the arid belts and into the cities that worshipped scarcity. Every time he keyed the repeater to life, fragments of emergency chatter leaked across the ether. Central ledger offline in 9 sectors. Desiccator array requested for orbital readiness. Hold all equity trades, hydrate futures limit down 15 points. The phrase desiccator array chilled him more than any ballistic threat. Years earlier, at a climate symposium that masqueraded as philanthropy, he'd reviewed a white paper on that very platform, a ring of aerosol satellites capable of triggering microdroughts by seeding upper atmospherics with hygroscopic nanofibers. Officially, the technology existed only as proof of concept, an insurance mechanism should hydrological warfare ever breach shareholder tolerance. Now the corporation sounded ready to fire it. Lux read the same subtexts. She found Cade hunched over his repeater and tossed him a sealed pouch of rehydrated fruit. Eat, she ordered. Storm thinking requires sugar. He tore the pouch with bloody fingernails, tasted peach, real peach, and almost wept. If they light the array, he said around the flavor, they'll boil these clouds before they cross the divide. Valley drinks, tower cities stay thirsty, myth contained. Lux's lenses were still absent, rain left her eyes raw but unblinking. Unless we got the trigger authority first. Marrow joined them, water sluicing off his cloak in silver ribbons. Trigger sits in the spindle, he said, and even uttering that name seemed to twist the air. Everyone knew the spindle, a kilometer-high obsidian needle buried in the license capital, Meridian City. It anchored the orbital uplink, the billing vaults, the corporate senate, the holiest of dry cathedrals. No outsider had set foot past its perimeter in 40 years. Cade tugged the pouch shut. I designed half the compliance architecture in that tower. If we reach its tertiary node stack, I can reverse the desiccator handshake and sign the array into indefinite standby. He took a breath he didn't feel he deserved. I'll also be signing my own indictment for 1,000 prior acts, but if the rain reaches Meridian first, they'll have no tribunal left willing to try me. Marrow's answer was simple, then we walk a river to the spindle. 1. Downriver exodus. By dawn of the 3rd day, the newborn river had gouged a navigable channel through the southern escarpment and poured into a canyon system that once served as freight corridors. The aquifer kin harvested flotsam, polymer shingles, drum lids, discarded mag sled engines, and stitched together skiffs whose prows bore chalk sigils blessing courses unwritten. Cade had never piloted anything larger than a city tram, but Lux slammed a tiller into his hands. Think like water, she said, not like rails. The flotilla set off beneath a bruised sky that flashed purple where desiccator drones prowled but dared not deploy payloads while thunderheads still boiled. Rain softened into a mist, the river's surface hissed under its own newborn heat. Around the bends, canyon walls glittered with microalgae woken from dormancy, sheets of emerald luminescence painting glyphs that no historian alive could translate. Mid-journey they encountered refugees stumbling along ledges above the flood, miners from salt dunes, hollow-eyed smugglers, widows clutching empty gourds. Some shouted warnings of warden blockades downstream, others begged for passage. Space on the skiffs was precious, but so were stories, each new voice a straw added to the corporate camel's back. Lux hauled the weakest aboard, rationed them broth brewed from nutrient sand molders. The river widened and the flotilla grew from 13 craft to nearly 40. Cade moved among passengers, suturing gashes, recalibrating water filters, listening. A gaunt man recognized him by name, by old legal headline, not recent rebellion, and tried to spit but had no saliva left. "You litigated the fog capture moratorium," the man croaked. "My township bled air because of you." Cade offered no defense, words would be a second betrayal. Instead, he handed the man the last of his wound thread and taught him how to stitch sails from silkweed fiber. The man's rage did not dim, but his hands found purpose, and purpose kept them both from drowning in memory. By the 5th day, they reached a railhead where rusted maglev pylons still bridged the canyon like fossil ribs. Water rushed halfway up the pylons, swirling with debris. Beyond lay the glass belt, 100 kilometers of cracked solar desert surrounding Meridian City. The river, unimaginably, now cut straight through its heart, turning paneled wasteland into a wet artery aimed at the metropolis. Marrow anchored the fleet beneath a toppled pylon and convened leaders from each skiff. Lightning spiders crawled across distant cloud anvils as he spoke. "Tonight the river ghosts us under solar fields. Wardens will not fire on reservoirs that feed their investor estates. They will wait with law at the city mouth. We do not bring war, we bring proof, water they cannot spin into mirage. But towers speak only market tongue. Our translator is the lawyer." All gazes fell to Cade. He felt as though every clause he'd ever drafted glowed on his skin. "I can breach the spindle," he said, voice low but resolute. Yet one man's credentials fade fast. "I'll need uplink saturation, every skiff, every radio scrambler blasting the same open-source charter once the array is neutralized. Call it a bill of flow. Simple language, water is heritage, not property." A murmur rippled, hope wrestled skepticism. Cade passed out data sticks encoded with the charter skeleton. Children ferried them from craft to craft as elders hacked solar inverters into broadcast amplifiers. That night the flotilla drifted beneath broken mirror lands reflecting a moon swollen with storm bruise. Glass shards bobbed like petals. Far ahead, city lights smeared the horizon, Meridian's upper terraces still dry, glittering, unaware that a river now argued with their desert skyline. 2. Meridian's rim. The city's perimeter defense manifested as a causeway lined with desal rigs converted into artillery towers. But the rigs were designed to pull brine, not halt floods. Water plowed through their intake teeth, short-circuited compressors, and left the guns coughing sparks. Wardens pivoted to fallback lines along boulevard embankments where planters once housed drought sculptures. They fired marker flares, painting the river in fluorescent cordons, but the current shrugged off color. Lux steered for a maintenance culvert beneath a civic hydra statue, an obsolete monument ironically titled the Eternal Sip. Rust flaked from its giant cup as skiffs vanished one by one into darkness behind the statue's pedestal. Inside, echoes boomed, the culvert merged with service channels that spiderwebbed under the financial district. Here the flotilla splintered, smaller craft wedged into hydrolifts, ascending toward storm drains. Larger barges remained below, staging relief caches in subway platforms now knee-deep in runoff. Marrow led ground teams to distribute canisters marked free pour only. Whenever a resident tried to scan the canister's QR face for licensing, the screen flashed "No ledger found," a negation that spread across social feeds like wildfire. Meanwhile, Cade and Lux sloshed down a corridor paved with corporate logos worn transparent by decades of janitorial polish. They emerged into a sub-lobby of the spindle where security gates once shimmered with algorithmic ornamentation but now blinked offline. The Trojan had buried deeper than Cade hoped. Turnstiles idled open, grav elevators displayed debugging kernels. They donned scavenged warden jackets to mask mud. Lux hid the rifle inside a maintenance duffel. Cade palmed an ID wafer he'd peeled off a drowned officer, rewrote its magnetic strip with his own dormant credentials, and prayed the system clocks remained confused. The elevator whisked them upward in eerie silence. Music channels had fallen to static. Through glass walls they glimpsed Meridian descending into carnival, plazas hosting spontaneous rain dances, neon tickers scrolling market halt in desperate amber, drones stuck midair on fail-safe loops. Water hammered rooftops like timpani mallets. The lift halted on node level 47 compliance concourse. Corridors here glowed sterile white, but emergency strobes bled red across floor decals, data fortification protocol echo. Cade guided Lux past still-sealed doors toward an unmarked service ladder ascending to a cryo-cooled attic where tertiary node clusters hummed. Halfway up, motion sensors pinged and a drone turret rotated from hideaway vents. Lux dove sliding under its arc, Cade froze, heart kiting inside ribs. The turret's optical module blinked, attempted user validation. Cade's hacked badge, still wet with culvert water, adhered to his chest. A green halo formed around him, then glitched, stuttered, settled into accept. The turret powered back down with a resigned whine. Lux exhaled a curse that fogged the air. "Your old ghost keys still charm machines," she whispered. "How many vaults did you line with that trick?" "Enough to damn me," he answered, and climbed. 3 skeleton keys of the spindle. The node attic was a cathedral of frost, vertical aisles of graphite servers exhaling vapor-cool breath. Each rack carried the weight of 1 billion micro-contracts, water trades, drought derivatives, emotional futures hedged against rainfall projections. And every rack, thanks to the Trojan, flashed amber integrity risk warnings cycling faster than human eyes could track. Lux guarded the ladder well while Cade navigated mezzanine grading toward a console crowned by a fiber-optic diadem. He plunged his shard drive, invoked root shell, and felt the system's recognition pulse through floor circuitry. But the network, like a wounded animal, now flailed. Counterscripts battled his code, isolating segments, severing legs to save the torso. He typed until wrists cramped, pseudo-legal injection strings disguised as emergency compliance patches. A klaxon wailed deeper inside the tower, tone difference signaled manual override. Someone with higher clearance had arrived. Cade's console spat red, local supersedure authorized. D. Van. Drusilla Van, the chair of Aquiolex, rumored to keep her blood hyper-distilled. In boardrooms she was called the Dry Widow. Cade wondered if she recognized his digital handwriting. He accelerated deployment, redirected array target coordinates to a null lat long above the ocean deserts, space over water, water over space, a loop of absurdity. Then he seeded the bill of flow into every ledger mirror, a charter compressed to one elegant sentence. Water is lifeblood unownable, any ledger that states otherwise forfeits domain. Systems stuttered, some rejecting, some accepting, but crucially, none flagging it as virus. It read like a clause, and clauses were sacred here. He sealed the push with an encryption wrapper that required human moral audit, an extinct corporate role abolished to save shareholder patience. No living executive could open it without resurrecting the very department they had murdered. Contention mitigated. Array handshake canceled. Yet lines of code still bled across the console, Van's counterforce chewing edges, localizing breach. Cade's patch would hold minutes, maybe an hour. Enough? Perhaps only if rain kept falling long enough for soil memory to knit. He yanked the drive. "We're ghosts again," he told Lux. But behind them a hiss of pressurization announced company. A blast door recessed in server stacks irised apart. 3 wardens strode out, armor slate black, visors copper. Between them walked Drusilla Van herself, immaculate in a hydration suit, channeling condensation into glass ampoules at her collarbones. The ampoules glowed sapphire, a visual sermon on her mastery over thirst. Cade felt Lux raise the rifle, but he whispered, "Not yet." His pulse thudded, memory of boardroom jargon flooded throat. Van regarded him as though he were a curious fungus. "Counselor Rivers," she said, "you traded laurels for mud. And you still harvest ghosts," he replied, surprised at his steadiness. She gestured to the servers, now flickering stormlight. "You've staged a spectacle. But when the bill comes due, the world will still need arbitration. Come back. Draft terms. We'll license precipitation instead. A graceful migration." Lux laughed once, a sound so raw it startled even her. Cade shook his head. "The rain refuses invoice." He raised the shard drive like an artifact. "And the ledger now carries a clause requiring a conscience." Van's smile thinned. She tilted her head, a warden leveled a shock lance. "Conscience can be bought. Tell me your price." Cade stepped between Lux and the lance. "Blood already paid," he said. He tapped the gash on his palm, long since washed clean. "Yours is overdue." Then sighed as if bored. She reached to a wrist console, a drone relay above whined awake. But before she could touch the command, the entire attic shuddered. An impact authority alarm blared, hydrostatic breach floor 30. The river had infiltrated the tower foundations, water pressure punching up elevators, ripping ballast seals. Lux seized the moment, firing a single arc that licked across the ceiling conduit. Sprinkler lines ruptured, coolant rained, shorting visor optics. Darkness punctured by strobe. In confusion, Cade shoved Van backward into a rack. Her hydration ampoules smashed, dumping precious blue down her front. She screamed, a sound not of pain but of insult. Lux dragged Cade toward the ladder. Wardens recovered quick, but the floor tilted as structural plates screamed. Streams of spring water burst from ventilation, soaking processors, turning graphite to fizzing fireworks. They plunged down the ladder as entire node columns toppled like dominoes. The last thing Cade saw before hatch closed was Drusilla Van clutching her shattered ampoules, fingers slick with the very commodity she had worshipped. For torrent above, torrent below. Gravity aids the righteous, someone once said, and tonight gravity belonged to Flood. Cade and Lux descended 13 levels via emergency chutes that spat them onto a mezzanine already knee-deep in rising brown water. Fire doors auto-sealed behind, trapping wardens above. They fought through hallways where murals of corporate triumph now streamed like watercolor secrets. When they reached the plaza, the spectacle stunned even Lux. Meridian's skyscraper canyon had become a basin. Traffic pods floated like lanterns. Citizens waited, dazed, some crying, some laughing, all drenched. Projector billboards glitched, displaying fragments of the bill of flow in flowing typeface. Water is lifeblood, uno nabel. Ledgers rendered null. 3 more lines, then reboot, then again, unstoppable. Marrow's ground teams handed out siphon straws, taught execs in designer moccasins how to filter gutter water. None refused. Thirst hierarchy collapsed faster than credit markets. Sirens of failing substations blended with hymns chanted by aquifer kin elders who stood on building steps reciting rainfall blessings in languages born underground. Lux squeezed Cade's arm, pointed skyward. Clouds had broken into tatters, but instead of retreating, they cycled, the natural convective engine rediscovered above concrete heat island. More rain approached. In that moment Cade understood, arrays or no arrays, the hydrosphere, once nudged, was choosing its own math. The mother vein had become mother cycle. Still, retaliation would come in other forms, legal, lethal, digital. Drusilla Van would not drown quietly. The servers destroyed were backups, core archives replicated off-site. The bill of flow spread, yes, but permanency required stewardship, community governance, not merely sabotage. Marrow reached them, eyes ablaze. City gates open, he said. People follow river outwards, some heading for towers with empty cisterns to teach harvest. But we still need a covenant anchor. Rain will stop, start again cycle, yes, but we must defend its mind. Cade's gaze settled on the spindle's cracked silhouette, lightning struck yet standing. Then we turn the spindle from ledger to lighthouse, he said. Broadcast open-source hydrology protocols on its carriers. Teach every region to map, share, replenish. He looked at Lux, at Marrow, at the milling thousands. We write new law carved in watercourse, not parchment. Lux planted the rifle butt down as though founding a flag. First we survive tonight. Then we climb. Above them the spindle's upper tiers flickered, some floors dark, others strobing, as though the tower were debating its own allegiance. Cade felt exhaustion weigh his bones, yet deeper still burned a clarity he had never tasted in corporate halls, the knowledge that redemption was not destination but motion, a current you learned to swim with, stroke by stroke, against undertow of memory. He opened his ruined canteen, inverted it, and watched the last factory-metered droplet fall unnoticed into the flood. The night tasted of copper and ozone, a charged hush that settled over Meridian like the held breath before verdict. Thunderheads still bruised the eastern sky, but above the drowned financial district a single ragged star winked through, as if the heavens were testing the city's new appetite for light. Cade Rivers stood knee-deep in runoff on what had once been Venture Avenue. Around him, aquifer kin and freshly liberated citizens worked side by side, stringing fiber lines rescued from darkened data kiosks, erecting bamboo masts cannibalized from rooftop gardens, lashing every stolen drone antenna into a jury-rigged relay web. Each node broadcast the same whisper-loud greeting in 43 languages, dialects, and code schemes. Bill of flow, provisional edition 0.0.1, propagation unrestricted. Already, distant receivers echoed the message: mountain hamlets, tundra rigs, jungle enclaves long written off as non-viable consumer zones. They all pinged back one word, scrolled in phosphor green on Cade's handheld repeater: received. Yet the work was only half a river, the other half towered above, the spindle, cracked and flickering, still holding its crown of orbital links. For the bill to root deeper than any counterscript, they had to seize the spindle's throat, the crown array deck on level 137, where laser uplinks lanced packets to every watermeter satellite still listening. If they could overwrite the deck's master key, every desiccator satellite would stop accepting closed license instructions. Instead, it would mirror open access hydromaps updated by citizen collectives. The weapon would become a lens. Lux, patched rifle across her back, waded to Cade's side. In the intermittent strobe flash of failing streetlights, her eyelids looked raw but clear. Scouts say wardens regroup inside the Spindles Plaza Rotunda, she reported. They've pulled power from emergency batteries. Drones are back on patrol patterns, but there's gaps between sweeps, 11 seconds of blind spot every minute. She handed him a strip of once white cloth. I scrounged this from a broker's office. He tried to use it as a flag of truce. Now it's a sling. Cade secured the sling around his burned forearm. He felt none of the old sting, only a strange buoyancy, as if his bones had finally traded accountancy for current. Across the plaza, sputtering hologram pillars showed contradictory data. Global Drought Index, suspended, flashed beside AQUEO-LEX, operations normal. Reality had forked, and both versions were fighting for the same stage. Marrow surfaced from the crowd like a pillar carved by flood, a dozen rag-swathed children in tow. They carried spools of insulated cable thicker than their arms. Lightning sharps, he said, tapping the spool. Conductive polymer stolen from the desal guns. Run this from the Spindles grounding fins straight into the river. When the next storm line arrives, the tower becomes a broadcast antenna the size of a mountain. His grin flashed feral. Even a dry widow cannot invoice the sky for that. 1. Infiltration, 11-second windows. The assault team formed quickly. Lux, Marrow, Cade, 4 kin runners fluent in duct systems, and 2 former warden techs rescued during the river's breach. Techs now eager to defect after seeing stock portfolios drown in real time. Each runner carried a coil of the conductive polymer. Lux carried the rifle. Cade pocketed his last shard drive, a fragment seated with the near-final bill of flow and an unlock script for the Crown Deck's quantum lock. They ghosted across the plaza during the second blind spot, boots splashing silently. Sirens wailed somewhere deeper in the city. The towers argued with themselves. A downed advertising drone sparked overhead, its recorded voice loop glitching. Celebrate hydration responsibly, respond, res, until it finally hissed out. Wardens clustered at the rotunda entrance, evac shields interlocked, flash lances humming. Their armor still gleamed, but their visors were patched with tape to block condensation. Rain had become sabotage. Lux signed count. 8 visible, at least 6 more inside vestibule shadows. Marrow slapped a mag flare onto a nearby hydrant stub. The flare erupted in magnesium daylight and steam plumed. The wardens reflexively braced against imagined gunfire, and in that welded second, Lux's rifle sang. EMP flechettes punched into lance batteries, knocking 4 suits dark. Cade and the kin runners slipped past as Lux and Marrow laid cover arcs, water sizzling off muzzle coils. Inside, the rotunda pulsed with emergency crimson. Statues of past CEOs, polished bronze monoliths, lay toppled or half-submerged, their plaques reading as ironic epitaphs. The Covenant Court elevator banks loomed ahead, but central shafts were flooded to mid-door. Runners took the stairwells, a dizzying priopen of access hatches and service ducts smelling of mildew and burning composites. Floor 25, 46, 71, each landing thicker with steam where chilled node rooms failed. They met scattered resistance, 2 internal security bots still on automated route, 1 hydrologist in hazard suit trying to rescue data cores. Cade disarmed the bots by voice override. They still recognized legacy legal admin credentials and let the hydrologist keep his cores in exchange for directions to the auxiliary lift that bypassed carbon exchange floors. Water is free, friend, he told the man. Take your research where it can breathe. The hydrologist hesitated, then whispered, there's a manual run ladder behind the isotope tanks. Van used it once during drills. 2. The Dry Widow's counterstroke. On floor 120 the tower shivered an unnatural oscillation. Emergency strobes shifted from red to amber. One of the ex-warden techs cursed. That's a repolarization sweep. They're trying to flush unauthorized nanotags. Your sling, my gloves, anything unregistered might fuse to bone. Cade saw the strategy. Van had triggered an electrostatic purge that would burn off every unlicensed fragment of electronics, including the conductive polymer spools. They had minutes to reach the crown before the purge arced. Marrow growled. Then we finish in 1 sprint. They heaved open a service hatch. Beyond, a vertiginous shaft climbed 200 meters to a faint circle of daylit drizzle, the crown deck's underfloor. A lattice of maintenance rungs lined the shaft, slippery, warped by recent quakes. Cade clipped the cable coil to his belt, inhaled, and began the ascent. Each rung burned nettle cold through his gloves. Midway up, static crackled along the metal, a prepulse of the coming purge. Lux climbed below, muttering a litany in guttural desert cant. A prayer or a mechanical checklist, he couldn't tell. At 70 meters remaining, the purge struck. A silver corona exploded along the shaft, ripping paint to plasma. Energy punched through the coils they carried, lighting the polymer ropes like neon serpents. Cade felt his sling tighten into heat, smelled scorched cotton, but the polymer survived, the stolen desal alloy designed to drink electricity. "Keep moving," he shouted through ozone haze. Above, the deck's floor hatch glinted. He reached it first, jammed the shard drive's titanium edge between seam and lock, and twisted. The hatch popped, exhaling a lungful of cold wind heavy with misted starlight. Level 137, rooftop plateau of the tallest tower in what was once a thirsty world. 3 crown array deck. The deck stretched like an obsidian plain scattered with skeletal masts, a forest of lasercom optics, phase array dishes, and backup turbine flowers spinning in the storm breeze. The view staggered them. Meridian below was a shimmering delta. Highways glinted as braided rivers, plaza fountains overflowed, side street gutters spouted into sky. In the distance, the newborn river carved a shining scar across the glass belt toward the faint glow of surviving tower grids. But the crown deck was not empty. Drusilla Van stood at the central control plinth, cloak whipping. 6 elite wardens flanked her, exosuit servos whining under acid rain. The control plinth's quantum core glowed violet, cycling new credentials. Van's gaze impaled Cade. "Defector Rivers," she said, voice fed through throat amp, resonant and cold. "Step away. I am rewriting water futures. Aklex will indemnify losses and the world will forget your tantrum." Cade saw the real-time data behind her. Desiccator arrays warming, target coordinates creeping back toward populated weather cells. The open-access Hydra maps flickered at the margins, and Empire reasserting its calculus. Lux lifted the rifle, wardens leveled plas shields that unfolded like iron petals. "Standoff." Rain hissed. Cade stepped forward, palm raised, holding no weapon but the cable coil. "Drusilla, this tower was designed to price breath itself. Tonight breath set its own price. Stand down. Let the world pay in gratitude instead of blood." She almost smiled. Gratitude never paid dividends. Then, to the wardens, remove them. 2 suits charged. Lux dropped to one knee, sighted, and fired. The coil rifle barked arcs that detonated at the first suit's knee actuators. The second dove sideways, but Marrow swung the conductive coil like a whip. The polymer lashed across the suit's visor, discharging residual purge current. The visor imploded inward in fireworks of glass. But the other 4 pressed, shields raised. Cade knew they would overwhelm by brute attrition. He looked at the mother storm brewing north, lightning forks etching clouds like wet circuitry. The polymer coil in his hand suddenly weighed like fate. He shouted to Lux, "Ground the coil." Marrow understood instantly. They sprinted opposite directions, unspooling cable across the deck, wrapping support pylons, forming a vast, shimmering X whose hardpoint aligned with the plinth and van. Wardens tried to sever the cable, but it flexed, reknitting on molecular hooks. Cade scrambled to the plinth, reached the quantum core pedestal, and thrust the shard drive into an auxiliary slot. The drive's script engaged, Crown Resignation Protocol, hold for storm key. It waited for an energy spike of precise amplitude, lightning. Van realized the trap. She lunged, but Lux intercepted, slamming rifle but against Van's collarbone ampoules. Glass cracked, blue water seeped out like surrendered jewels. Then screamed more in outrage than pain. Thunder roared. A bolt stabbed the spindle's lightning rod. The charge raced down through the tower's veins, discovered the polymer X, found the quantum core, and exploded outward in a halo of turquoise fire. Every dish, laser mast, and drone antenna on the deck lit like a constellation. At that instant, the shard drive fired, uploading the final bill of flow paired with a command, desiccator mode, spectator only. Satellites across low orbit blinked, accepted the new route certificate, and permanently locked out proprietary target coordinates. Hydrometric authority shifted to quorum of open nodes defined by sensor swarms launched moments earlier from skiffs downriver, a democracy of droplets. Van staggered, suit sparking, water pouring freely from shredded ampoules. Flames licked her cloak edges. She glared at Cade through cracking lenses. "Anarchy guarantees famine," she hissed. He answered softly, "Community guarantees harvest." Wardens, suits fried, dropped their weapons. Some tore helmets off to gulp rain. The lightning fade left an eerie calm broken only by turbine flowers spinning faster, reveling in electricity. For lighthouse. Dawn bled silver over cloud tatters. Cade, Lux, Marrow, and the runners secured the deck. They hauled remaining coil to refurbish turbines, tuned laser masts to broadcast hydrology tutorials, and configured a beacon cycling the bill in continuous loop. Citizens climbed the tower stairwells, carrying seedlings, data drives, and questions. Nobody demanded permission. Below, Meridian evolved by the hour. Makeshift aqueducts channeled runoff into dry zones, rooftop gardeners grafted dew-collecting vines to skybridges, desal rigs now served as collaborative flood monitors. The economy of thirst had flipped to an ecology of flow. Cade stood at the parapet where the Spindle's logo once glowed. A salvage crew was already prying off the brass letters. He traced invisible characters, ghosts of his former life, then let his hand drop. Lux joined him. Her eyes, though inflamed, reflected open water rather than mirrored scarcity. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel hollow," he admitted. "Hollow holds more sky." She offered a cracked ampoule half-filled with the first sunrise-charged condensation. They drank together, no sensors, no meters. It tasted of copper roofs and gull cries of possibility. Marrow arrived, tablet in hand. Signal from Southern Belt. Fog collectors rebooted themselves. Their piping reservoirs straight to refugee quarters. No gate fees. He paused, eyes wet. "Your clause won." Cade shook his head. "Ours." He glanced toward the horizon, where storm fronts moved without leash. Rain will wander, drought will return somewhere. But it won't be patented. And when thirst rears, people will know pathways to each other before they know pathways to markets. Lux slung her rifle, a relic now more than weapon. "So, Councilor Rivers, the river flows. What council do you keep?" He looked at the reclaimed city, then at the skies stitching themselves with newborn cirrus. "I keep moving water," he said. "Legal grammar is dead weight. Time to learn river grammar." Marrow laughed. "I'll draft the first dictionary." Below, children splashed through alley streams, chasing neon fish newly home in streets that once forbade puddles. Above, the Spindle's masts flared green, a heartbeat of an unlicensed future. Cade closed his eyes. He could still hear the old courtroom gavel made of melting ice, but its echoes were fading, replaced by the complex music of countless unmetered drops colliding, rejoining, beginning. A verdict rendered in flow. He opened his eyes to Lux, to Marrow, to the sprawling experiment of mercy unfolding beneath and above them. "Let's get to work," he said.